Yeah, so good evening, everyone. I did my B in PSG College of Technology, and I was campus placed in NIT. So I started my role or career as a faculty in NIT, became a group leader, and then I worked there for about 12 years. I was a territory head handling operations and business and sales. And later I moved to corporate sales. Sometime around 2002, I decided to move into a career in HR. In fact, my husband encouraged me to do a course in XLRA, which was an executive satellite postgraduate program in human resources. So I had worked with AMP Sanmar, and I got an opportunity to work with Nokia when I finished the course when I was working in AMP Sanmar. That was an Australian and company called AMP Wealth Management Company and Sanmar Group, which was a traditional Indian company. So I saw a merger of two different cultures there, and I was parallelly doing my course when this opportunity in Nokia came up, which is a manufacturing plant, electronic manufacturing plant being set up in Sri Perumbudur. It's the first electronic plant in Chennai and in Tamil Nadu. So I got an opportunity to head the HRD for the Chennai plant, the developmental side of HR, and was actively involved in the project where it was a grassroots project where we had to ramp up the workforce from zero to about 8,000. I worked there for 5 years. I was also involved very closely with some global HR projects, and later it was quite stressful to travel that far. I moved to. I had a short stint in Larsen and Toubro in learning and development, but that was just about 6 months. I moved to AIM. I moved to Kone Elevators. That's another Finnish company. So both Nokia and Kone were Finnish companies. So for 10 years, I've seen the culture between two different Finnish companies and Indian company, and how the cross-cultural differences we navigated through. And in Kone was GM talent management, focusing on recruitment, training, and performance management. And recently, in after 5 years in Kone, I've joined CAMS, which is a financial services Indian wealth management. It's a back office for asset management companies. So, so I've been here for close to 5 years, and I lead the HR for the team. So that's a little bit about my professional background. So I moved from business and operations to HR.
Yes, and most of the time she has worked in organizations of fairly large size. Nokia is very big, and Kone also is a large company, and CAMS is also fairly a large organization. Whereas I was working mostly in the mid-sized companies, smaller companies. The maximum I went for 2,000. She is handling about 5,000 employees now in CAMS.
Yeah, close to 6,000, including the IT wing.
Okay. So this is she's heading the HR team, and it's about 50, 60 people in HR.
We have about 40 in HR.
And admin?
Admin would be about 60.
So about 100
so
people.
totally 100.
100 people. Yeah, okay. This is a thing she's handling now. And this is a book on organizational behavior. This book has various modules, essentially on individual behavior and group behavior. Okay, and of course, leadership and change and conflicts and culture follows, but essentially it's about individual and group behavior. Ma'am, please correct me if I get this wrong. So I will just start this conversation. Afterwards, they can take over. Would you like to tell about the kind of people you hire? I'm not talking about technical other skills. I'm talking about the behavioral competencies that you look for. What kind of people you'd like to hire? Maybe for this organization or any other organization. We are an organization neutral. We're talking about the perspectives.
Okay, so the kind of people we hire, sometimes we try to align it to the culture of the organization and the value system in the company, and also the competencies that you look for in the individual. So if I have to talk about a couple of experiences, I can say now we hire a lot of frontline managers. So assistant manager, deputy manager, then we have a functional manager. They're all under the junior management category. Then we have mid managers who could be the senior managers and the AGMs. Then we have the senior management. So in each of the, and then we also have skills for the production workforce, which are the individual or the specialist stream. So for example, if I have to take the assistant manager or a deputy manager who's a frontline manager who's leading a team, who could be a first-time manager and who's leading a team of, let's say, executives or processing officers, then we try to do a competency-based hiring. We look for certain behavioral competencies, and we look for examples where he has evidenced the competencies that are required for the role. Now, for instance, if you look at a frontline manager, it could be his, communication. It could be his ability to articulate a complex task in a very simple way for a person to understand. See, being in the mutual fund industry, some of the processes are very complex in the industry, so uh, we ask for examples. So we look at a situational interview or a behavioral interview and see how, look for evidence that he's able to simplify a very complex situation, and how he explained that task to his team member and how they were able to solve the task. It could be that way. Or his examples of, see, we are a time bound transaction processing firm and company, and we are regulated by SEBI. So our tasks, certain things will have to be done and executed the very same day. There are very stringent SLAs that are governed by SEBI. So we look at his ability to deal with pressure. Sometimes the volumes will fluctuate and they will have to deliver with a TAT of T minus one, or I mean on T date or T plus one. So how is, and he will have to scale up the team, or either some days they'll have to stretch, some days the volumes may be low. So we will look for evidence of ability to handle that pressure and being able to deliver on time. So that from the result orientation, or passion for performance, we look at that competency and we look for examples, because he may be coming from a multinational firm where the pressure situation may not be so high, a back office for or a UK firm or so on. So we look for that evidence, whereas in an Indian setup, it could be very the vagaries of the market could be very demanding. Then we look, for example, customer centricity. We look at his ability to anticipate the needs of the customer and be able to solve the problems. I mean, provide solutions for the customer. So we ask him, give an example of some problem that he systemically solved to delight a customer. So when he is able to answer the questions, giving evidence that yes, he looked at an issue and he solved it end to end. He just didn't look at it transactionally, but systemically. Then we know his ability to handle customer, or if there has been a customer complaint, and how does he listen to the needs of the customer and then empathizes and handles it. So these are some of the ways by which we guide our managers to select the right candidate. So if there are, let's say, 7 or 8 competencies that need to be assessed, then we say that HR will assess some basic competencies, the first level interview, and the first level manager will assess some of the competencies, and then the next level manager will look for certain value behaviors, alignment and culture fit. So it could be certain other type of questions, which will see whether he will, be able to fit in well into the company. Now, for example, risk and compliance is one of our values. So maybe the second level manager will look at his ability to handle compliance or identify risks and mitigate them. So some questions related to that. So that's the approach that we use here. In Kone, we used to look at sales competencies. So depending upon the role, we would have certain behavioral indicators, and we will look like, let's say, a sales engineer or a sales manager. In Kone, Kone is an elevator company, and in sales, in elevator sales, it's not so much of persuasiveness that is required. It's actually very good networking internally. For instance, are they able to collaborate and network internally with the stakeholders? For instance, if there is a pricing quote that is required, are they able to work with the pricing team and get the quote to the client quickly? So that is a little bit about networking without much of lead time. Or generally, they get their sales through references. So while sales is important, actually execution is what propels the sales. So the ownership of the salesperson in ensuring that once a sale is done, he collaborates with the installation team and ensures that the execution happens and sorts out some issues for the client. So collaboration skill, for instance, we look for that. So these are some of the success factors that drive a high performing salesperson. So we look for those traits in the interview. So we have some sort of an ideal profile and look for those traits which will give us a fair idea that this person will be successful in the company.
That's good. But does it happen like that? Meaning, what are the factors on which people get promoted? What kind of people who are actually successful in the organization? Is it the same or something else? If I ask you this question separately, what kind of people get promoted? Would you give the same answer?
Yeah, so what there's two things that I've seen. People get recognized and rewarded for their performance, but generally we also see that growth potential is what at very senior leaders, they look at the potential for growth, for promotion. So yes, there are behavioral. Ideally, the values is what value behavior modeling is what will be the behavioral traits that will lead to promotion. So that is true. But then there are other factors like how he can perform in the next role. So there would be a person may be performing well in the current role, but how he can, what is the growth capacity he has, which could be his ability, which is, it could be a function of his ability and competencies, his motivation and his aspiration. So for promotion, we also look at those aspects. How aspiring is he? Many people get promoted when they are willing to take on additional responsibilities, when they are flexible to move across jobs or across roles or across locations, and they are well motivated and also have the competencies for the higher role.
Okay.
So competencies for the present role may be different from the competencies for the higher role. And that's ideal. Sometimes it doesn't in reality happen that way, because see now a customer centricity at a junior manager level is very different from customer centricity or delighting the customers at a senior manager level. And if people can understand that, or at least demonstrate it to the fullest form, then they are promotable talent.
Can we say at least the reverse of it? That means the initial competencies that you looked for and hired them into the organization, if they don't have it, by chance you made a mistake, if they don't have it, they are not successful in the organization. How this organization treats them? What happens to them?
Very difficult question to ask, but yes, sometimes when we make a mistake in hiring, then we find, and then this happens quite pertinently sometimes in our leadership hires. So when you don't really look at the exact competencies for the role and you hire by perception, for instance, sometimes like communication skills can subvert your selection process, or somebody who's articulating extremely well might get selected for the job, but it may not translate to performance in the environment that you are looking for. Then it becomes a disappointment in that role. In our company, we give people a lot of time to perform and to succeed in that role, because our operations are very complex. What is very unique about the current organization is that it's extremely process driven. So one needs to understand the mutual fund domain, I mean entire aspect of asset management. Then they also have to understand the systems that we use, and they also need to understand all the rules that are there, and the schemes that are there, and they need to get into a lot of depth. So there is always a possibility. There has been instances where people who have played very senior leadership roles and are able to look at issues from, let's say, from an altitude, and not really at the ground level, then there is a problem. So how do you look at it 100 feet above the ground, and how are you also narrowing it down right to the bottom of the issue? Sometimes people fail. So they don't understand the real root cause of a problem and they don't try to fix it. So therefore, the orientation towards problem solving, towards details, if that is not there, even at a senior leadership level, then there is a possibility that he's a wrong hire in the organization. And sometimes they do leave after a point of time when they're not successful. They try to given slightly lesser roles, and if they're still not able to succeed, then it is, there's not much of potential left in the to remain in the company.
How about the values? Are they the go or no go factors kind of thing? If there is a value mismatch, then they are not there at all. Or unless there is a value, congruence, they cannot build anything further on this. Can we say this about your organization or earlier organization also?
So in different companies, yeah, it is different, because a person tends to stay in the company longer when the personal values and the company values are in congruence. But when you find that, at least I have seen that when my personal values are not very much in congruence with the company that I work for, then I did not stay for long. Though there has been companies where I've successfully stayed for more than 10 years, 5 years, or 6 years even. So that is true. It's a complete culture mismatch. It is a problem, and that is why. See, I can give you an example. When we were in AMP and Sanmar, AMP was an Australian wealth management firm, and Sanmar was a traditional Indian company, and traditional Indian manufacturing company. And when the insurance industry opened up in 2002, and the government had allowed foreign direct investment into insurance, I think it was a 49%, 51% kind of a model of investment. There were about 10, 12 insurance companies that spurted in India, and AMP Sanmar was one of them. AMP had the knowledge of insurance. It was an Australian company, and Sanmar did not have any knowledge, but they wanted to make a foray into financial services. But while everything was going on fine, and I would attribute, in fact, we were having a plan to start 1,000 branches. But somewhere there were cultural differences, and that was not the only reason, but there were cultural differences between AMP and Sanmar. So we had the CEO was from AMP and the COO was from Sanmar. So it used to be very different when you interact with the AMP leaders and the Sanmar leaders. The style of leadership, the way of engagement, the protocols that were there, the power distance between the leaders, the collectivism, all that. A lot of things were very different between the two companies, and it did not work out. And that is why that the partnership did not really sustain. Of course, there were other reasons like AMP wanted to consolidate in Australia, so they went back. But I could see a vast difference between the leadership in two companies, and culture plays a very, very important. We tried to do some cultural assimilation, and we brought in an Australian head HR and a lot of stuff we tried to do, culture workshops, etc. But that didn't work out. But yes, culture is an individual thrives in the company when he's able to align to the culture of the organization. See, one example I can say personally is like I never knew anything about risk and compliance. See, in Nokia, the values were slightly very soft and very different. It was like achieving together and being very humane. So when the culture, when you say being very humane, it's like having a very beautiful phone, which is so nice for the user to use it, and it's the same thing will translate in the work environment also. That winning together and the feelings used to be very well espoused in that culture. In Kone, it was safety was one of the very important things. The safety was something that was driven in the organization apart from the values. In camps, it was risk and compliance was part of their culture. Being extremely for example, I never knew the word compliance. I mean, while I handled different aspects of HR, I didn't handle compliance. So actually, I didn't know much about compliance. But today, I've understood how important it is to be very compliant. So that initially, it took me some time to adapt to being compliant, being very conscientious, and then I realized that because the industry requires that level of financial fiduciary and being compliant, people also had to have that compliance orientation. So risk and compliance is a risk averseness, and compliance is a culture in the company, and we are promoting the behaviors related to a very compliant culture. We are also learning how to be more and more compliant in every aspect.
We also deal with this personality types. You are familiar. She's familiar with MBTI.
Remember much.
Okay,
much,
certified and all. What kind of personality types do well in a typical organization? I know it's. Can we say in some organization this kind of personality types do well, and some other organization some other types of personality types do well? Can we talk about that?
So that is very difficult to say something like that. See, now for example, Finnish culture. Finns are very Nokia. I mean, Finns are very introverted. Nokia is a Finnish company, and they are extremely introverted in nature. They would speak only a few words when required. And if you look at a meeting, now let's say we have a meeting at 9 o'clock. It will be very interesting. A Finn would probably be there at 8:45 or 8:50, and he has 10 minutes for the meeting to start. So this Finn would, very busily be blocking his calendars for the day, and ensuring some of his mails are sent. And 9 o'clock in the meeting, when it comes to give an update on his aspect to the point in his particular slide, he would speak. But otherwise, he would restrict himself in the communication to that. Then the second thing about a Finn is, in Finland, the duration of the day is very short. So it becomes very dark quickly. Or let's say they have dinner by 5:36 and their day is only till 4:30, 8:30 to 4:30 type of office hours, etc. So they're extremely well planned. So if you have to go at 4:30 for dinner, and if let's say you have 5 minutes before the meeting, they would have planned at home what they need to discuss in that 5 minutes, which would be who will go in which car and how they will reach the restaurant and what time they should start and what time they will reach and what time will the dinner will be very precise. So their time orientation is very different, and therefore their behaviors are also different, and they are successful in that way. Whereas if you see Indians, if we have to come for a meeting, one will probably 9 o'clock meeting will come at 9:10, or even if we come earlier, we would spend a lot of time on niceties. Hi, hello, how are you? We wouldn't have, and we wouldn't be just sitting on a system and looking at what is the email that I have to close or how I have to plan my calendar. So to that extent, so you can say personality type may not necessarily be directly linked to performance. It can vary, but the behaviors in different cultures are different, because here we found Finns are extremely planned. We did not give a perception that we were extremely planned. See, I can take one example. When we were starting the factory, they were expecting that we keep sharing our plans. I joined in August, and by December we were supposed to start that huge Nokia factory. So literally we were left with September, October, November, December. I joined in 4 months or so, and they were constantly asking us what is the plan and what is the plan. Now our culture was that okay, I will complete everything and then share with you the plan. But what they do is they collaboratively plan. Okay, so we are extroverted, we reach out to people, we actually we had to reach I had to reach out to different countries and find out how the electronic manufacturing actually happens, what kind of skills, what kind of training to give. And they also provided a lot of information. They are quite collaborative, but I did not share the full plan with them. So they were feeling very uncomfortable that they are not able to see a visual plan on how this whole the onboarding and induction of people, 300 people a week we were going to add. But when they actually saw the performance, in December itself, we had 1,000 people on board. They were totally flabbergasted. The way we did our inauguration, the way the manpower joined, the way they trained. So the personality types were different. Indians were very different type of a culture. But then performance and personality, to some extent, let's say an extroverted person in sales would perform better because he will knock at the door of the client, so it helps. But if you look at sales where you have to prepare well for a sales pitch, you have to do a lot of documentation and have your proposal ready and then make a presentation. Even an introverted person can actually present well. So for example,
do you look for any personality traits when you hire people?
Not really. Okay, so what we are doing is like MBTI we don't use for hiring. So whether a person is extroverted or introverted, or that we don't use for hiring. But in one company we use DISC for hiring people. So in AMP, when we were looking at a sales manager, we used dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness as some of the skills for hiring. Some of the behaviors for hiring a salesperson. Where we said he should be high on conscientiousness. That again was compliance. High, moderate on influence, and urgency has to be high. So steadiness has to be opposite, I think, low. And and dominance and initiative should be moderate. So that we did when we hired salespeople. I think even in Kone, we used a personality tool called PAPI, Personality and Preferences Inventory. There we found that some of the successful salespeople had high attention to detail.
In another 3 minutes, it will go off. We'll come back in the same link. Is that okay? Maybe we'll continue for another 10-15 minutes. Yeah.
High attention to detail. And then for networking, a need for social and belongingness. I think that was one of the behavior traits. So that was something that we looked for. And then we can say something related to fast-paced work. That was also one of the traits that we look for. So some behavioral traits, work preferences and work behaviors is what we focus on more than the innate personality, I can say.
Okay. And values, adhering to the values is learning in the job, in the organization, not necessarily it is part of their values. Do you look for values?
Certain things like in some roles like HR or admin, we look for ethics. Yes, and we look at values in the leadership levels. Senior leadership roles levels, we look for value behaviors. At second or third level interviews, then those are the value behaviors that we see if they are aligning to those value behaviors.
Values of the
Not
organization and values of the
organization
individual.
values, not individual values. It's more to do with the personal values, like ethics and integrity, and only those things.
Okay.
Not really any other values.
Yes, you can. Would you like to ask anything? I just hijacked the entire thing. Yes, Damodaran, you want to go?
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. Madam, I've got some kinds of questions to be asked. And it is absolutely of our book only. We are writing a book on organizational behavior, in which we have got 6 modules. Okay, so my questions are from module 1. Probably students will definitely get kind of benefit out of your answers. So there are many concepts in organizational behavior. So one of the concepts is leadership, okay, in which we talk about different models of leadership. And can you tell us about which model is very useful and what model you follow? There are 4 or 5 models. Okay, can you please?
At least situational leadership was what I remember. Some of these concepts we have forgotten completely. But then what I've seen is that delegating correctly to the right person is very important. So depending upon the skill and the will of the person, whether he is having the competence and the interest to do that particular task, then assigning that activity, the delegation, depending upon what whether to be a highly delegative, whether to have a participative style of leadership, whether to do a telling type of leadership or a selling kind of leadership, that matters to different people. Now, some people, you just delegate the task, they will do it, certain tasks, they will do it effectively on their own, and you don't need to get involved at all. In fact, if you interfere, they will not like it. But the same person in another area will feel that where you will have to go into a telling mode or a little prescriptive mode. So the different styles of leadership for different people, and also different styles of leadership for different tasks for the same person. So some people will have to convince them to do the task because they would not have bought into what you're doing. And sometimes when I deal with a very senior manager in the team, I find that I will actually have to take a lot of effort to convince to be able to, for him to understand what is required. There was one example where this person was not approving the salaries of highly competent technical DBAs and network administrators, because the recruiters were hiring from a high cost and he is from the compensation team. So he was I always have that while recruitment team will come up with the offers, I have the compensation team to approve. So there is a little bit of a healthy conflict in that. He was not at all approving the offer, saying that you're bringing in candidates is very high cost and upsetting the internal parity, which was a fact. Then I had to literally go and find out. I mean, we had a benchmarking survey information. So I helped him to pull out the benchmarking survey information. And then I had to show him that this is where the current ranges are, what is the market salaries. Then he got convinced. And I had to bring the recruitment team together and also show them the internal parity. So it took some effort to convince him. Only then he was able to. Then after that, things became very smooth. He started approving. So sometimes by telling it didn't work. Many times I was trying to tell him just approve it. We know it's bad, but only after showing all the data he got convinced. So it is a very selling kind of a leadership style that you will have to use. Sometimes we can just some activities you just delegate, they'll get things done. Yeah, so it depends upon the competency of the person. It depends upon the motivation levels. The style
Yes.
of leadership that
Yes.
you adopt. Yeah.
And as per your long-term experience in HR, uh, uh, how do you or what do you think about challenges? Do you feel any challenges in HR? In the
Yeah,
present
every day it's every day there are challenges. Every day there are decisions that we are taking constantly.